I have to start this morning with an apology to all of you because I'm the youth director for Mercy Hill, and we have a lead teaching pastor named Tommy, who all of you probably came here to listen to, and he is 40 minutes west of here, so it's too late for you to leave and go catch his sermon. You're stuck with me. They do occasionally intentionally put me up here because if God can use me, then that should fill all of you with the confidence that God can use you too. So this is just a testimony to God's power here. I will say it is Super Bowl Sunday. That hasn't passed me by, and I'm sure there are people in here who are also acknowledging that. And I feel the need to bring that up because I one time made a major mistake on a Super Bowl Sunday weekend, and that was because I'm youth director, I schedule a kids camp. And one particular year, I scheduled this camp, and somebody calls me after it's scheduled, and they're like, Dontae, this is really bad. I have bad news. I was like, oh my gosh, like what happened? Okay, well, what's going on? They're like, some kids might not be able to go for the weekend. It's like, whoa, what happened? They're like, it's on Super Bowl Sunday weekend. I was like, okay, we have pickup on Sunday? Sunday at noon, the game is at 6. What's the issue here? They're like, some of the parents are refusing to come pick up their kids. It's like, what? Excuse me? This is a true story, by the way. I said, this is a direct quote. I said, tell those bums to come pick up their kids. You know, it's Super Bowl Sunday, so they can't learn about God for the weekend. Okay. These are just a few different things you deal with in ministry. But this morning, I don't have camp scheduled because I was smarter this year. We already took care of that, and I'm here to preach with you all, so I'm excited for that. We're going to jump back into Exodus. This is Exodus chapter 18, and I'm going to start in verse 5, and we're going to go ahead and go through the end of the chapter here, just because it has a lot of context that will be necessary here. Starting in verse 5. Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness, where he was encamped at the mountain of God. And when he sent word to Moses, your father-in-law Jethro am coming to you with your wife and her 2 sons with her. Moses went out to meet his father-in-law and bowed down and kissed him. And they asked each other of their welfare and went into the tent. Then Moses told his father-in-law all that the Lord had done to Pharaoh and to the Egyptians for Israel's sake, all the hardship that had come upon them in the way, and how the Lord had delivered them. And Jethro rejoiced for all the good that the Lord had done to Israel, in that he had delivered them out of the hand of the Egyptians. Jethro said, Blessed be the Lord, who has delivered you out of the hand of the Egyptians and out of the hand of Pharaoh, and has delivered the people from under the hand of the Egyptians. Now I know that the Lord is greater than all gods, because in this affair they dealt arrogantly with the people. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, brought a burnt offering and sacrifices to God. And Aaron came with all the elders of Israel to eat bread with Moses' father-in-law before God. The next day Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, What is this that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone, and all of the people stand around you from morning till evening? And Moses said to his father-in-law, Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make them know the statutes of God and his laws. Moses' father-in-law said to him, What you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for this thing is too heavy for you. You shall not be able to do it alone. Now obey my voice, and I will give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their cases to God, and you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws, and make known the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God, who are trustworthy and hate a bribe, and place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands and of hundreds and of 50s and of 10s, and let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but any small matter they shall decide themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. And if you do this, God will direct you. You will be able to endure, and all this people also go to their place in peace. So Moses listened to the voice. Don't worry, we're almost done. So Moses listened to the voice of his father-in-law and did all that he had said. Moses chose able men out of all Israel and made them heads over the people, chiefs of thousands and of hundreds and of fifties and of tens. And they judged the people at all times. Any hard case they brought to Moses, but any small matter they decided themselves. Then Moses let his father-in-law depart, and he went away to his own country. Now, that was a longer section of scripture, so go ahead, look to your left and right, and shake away anybody who fell asleep during that. We want to make sure they're catching what God has for them this morning, so try not to let them nod off. All right, so I thought it very important to first read that section in its entirety so that we have enough context for any of this conversation to make sense. Overall, this morning, I wanted to talk mainly about the wisdom that was brought up to Moses and how God uses people in certain ways that end up benefiting our walk with him. And there's a lot there that's really beneficial for us, all of our individual lives with God. But first, we have to understand it. So, before we jump into the specific wisdom that Moses was given, I find it very important to talk about the thing that has to come first in order to receive wisdom. So before we talk about wisdom, I want to talk about the humility of Moses. You see, of all the people who are in the Bible, Moses has to be one of the more impressive figures. Like, there's only so many of them that you hear and you're like, oh my gosh, that person. Moses is definitely in that list. And for those of you who have forgotten about his accomplishments, I have them right here so that we can rattle them off. Number one, he gave up a life of wealth and luxury as an Egyptian prince so that he could go out and do ministry in a desert. And for those of you who, and this is a really, really important point because most of us just don't even acknowledge that as one of the impressive things. They're like, oh yeah, Moses did this, he did that. And we don't even realize the start of his ministry was something that most of us would struggle to make that decision. Moses didn't have to give up his life as an Egyptian. He personally decided to get involved when he saw an Israelite being disciplined in such a way where they might have died. This person was being harmed. And so Moses took it upon himself to put his own status, his own comfort in jeopardy. And for those of you who don't know what that means, the estimated wealth of the Egyptians back then is on the low end in the billions and on the high end in the trillions. So either way, they were extremely rich. And Moses gave that all up to go out and live in the desert. Now, I sometimes find myself talking about how I started in ministry, and that was, I was a businessman. I lived a nice life of business. I tried to speed run retirement. That was my running joke to everybody who knew me back then. And I was making decent money for somebody in their 20s, and I, at one point, was like, you know what? Like, I'm not fulfilled. I'm going to give this up so I can become a youth pastor, which came with like a heavy pay decrease, which is usually the way it goes in ministry, is you're not going there so that you can get rich unless we start preaching prosperity gospel. I've been trying in our staff meetings. They haven't went for it yet, so my raise is, I think, on a standstill for a little bit. But I find myself occasionally thinking to that and being like, yeah, like I'm really a solid Christian because I was willing to give up all of this success in the world so that I could become a minister and make less money. And if you took a pile of the money that Dontae gave up to go into ministry, and you had the pile of the money that Moses gave up to go into ministry, you'd be like, oh, there's just one pile there, because mine would seem so vastly insignificant compared to what Moses gave up. And that was just his first step. Point two, he directly and audibly talked to God on the regular. I've talked to many Christians who would love to have that happen just once in their life. And if it happened in their life, they'd probably never shut up about it. It's like, God, imagine this actually happens to you. You're at your house, and God shows up to you in form of a burning bush there and decides to talk to you audibly. It's not a listening, trying to hear the subtle sounds. It's like, boom, he's there. Very flashy, very apparent. I would imagine that would be your go-to story anytime that somebody's like, did anything interesting happen to you? Well, did anything interesting happen to me? Yeah, God talks to me like there's this one thing that happened 20 years ago by. You're like, 20 years ago, you know what happened to me? Because it's that impressive. Yet God did these kind of things with Moses on the regular. That wasn't his one-off story. Then number 3, he had been used by God to perform a multitude of signs and wonders. We all know that God used him to at least perform the 10 plagues to free the Israelites. But personally for me, the thing that I always find the most impressive has always been the splitting of the Red Sea. And for those of you who don't know, that the low end of the Red Sea is at least multiple miles long. So like you're talking a massive body of water that's just like pushed to either side, just all of this rushing water going through. And it's just pushed and held there. And you're walking on dry land all the way through for miles. And then the second that you're off, your enemies try to go through, and God sends that crashing back. That's awe-inspiring. And it's also impossible unless God is directly with you and working through you. So, after all of that, I think you'll start to get the picture a little bit better when we talk about the verses that we just read. This is all the setup. This is all the preamble. And then Moses' father-in-law comes in. After all of the impressive things that he has done, he has his in-law come in, and the thing he decides to do is tell him what he's doing wrong. How many of you have in-laws that think they know everything? Don't raise your hand. Don't look too close. Okay? I saw some of you. There's a gleam in the eye the second I said that. I'm not here to cause too much division this morning. I want you to be able to enjoy the Super Bowl. I don't want you to have to deal with the ride home. But you know in your mind if you have issues with in-laws. I personally have great in-laws, just to brag. And I hope that is true for all of you. Like I truly do enjoy my own in-laws. But I happen to know for a fact that some of you in this room do not have in-laws that are easy to get along with. I know because it's easy to complain about. Did you know what they did the other day? It's like this. It's if you work at this certain job and you're like, oh, I like this job. You're like, oh, you chose that as your career path? That's interesting. I would have personally chose this. It seems like it'll maybe be better, more lucrative, long-term, more respectable. Or if you're doing work on your house or something like that, they think you're doing it wrong. They're like, oh, you started work on that? I thought that was looking good enough. You know what you should have changed is this. Oh, you chose that paint color? That's really interesting. Oh, you chose that couch? Decent taste, okay. I see you're a little different. You're going for the unique. And then if you rent, you shouldn't have rented. If you bought a house, you shouldn't have bought it in this market. Basically, you're starting to get the picture. They're very annoying in-laws, and we all know what that means. So Moses gets done doing all these amazing things, and here comes his in-law to tell him now what he should not be doing. This is Exodus chapter 18, starting verse 17, going through 18. Moses' father-in-law said to him, "What you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you." You see, he could have easily chose to get annoyed with his father-in-law instead of listening to him. And that's why I think it's really important to do the whole preamble, to do the whole talk about all the frustrations that you could have with people who never think that you do enough, and they can only be critical. He could have said things like, oh, it's too heavy for me. Some people might have said the Red Sea was too heavy, but God didn't have a problem using me to lift that, did he? Or he could have said, oh, it's not good. Some people might say freeing all the Israelites from Egypt was a good thing. So how about that? Or if it's about hearing from God, I have that covered. When's the last time he came up to you in a burning bush? Father-in-law, Jethro? I think I'm all set. I think God and I are on the same page. This very well could have been his position. And honestly, when I hear some of those out loud, I'm like, well, those are good points. If Tommy split like Lake Michigan, and he's like, all right, guys, we're going to walk through, my immediate thing in the aftermath wouldn't be in a staff meeting to be like, you know what, Tommy, I think there's some things you're doing wrong in church. I'd be like, you know what, let me shut up for the rest of these staff meeting and see what you're doing right, man. You clearly are good with God. Let me figure out what you're doing. But Moses does something that's very odd and goes directly against our human nature. He humbled himself and listened. Proverbs chapter 8, verse 13. The fear of the Lord is hatred of evil, pride and arrogance in the way of evil, and perverted speech I hate. The fear of the Lord. Fear of walking out of step with God and no longer being in his favor. Fear of anything that would separate you from God, so intense that you would hate the very notion of it. Pride and arrogance are the way of evil. And Moses seems to have been blessed in such a way where he didn't struggle with taking pride in himself for ultimately what were God's accomplishments. In fact, we can be confident that this is the case because we're directly told in Scripture that Moses was the most humble man in earth. Numbers chapter 12, verse 3. Now the man Moses was very humble, more than any person who is on the face of the earth. This is a bold claim, but I'm very inclined to believe it. Because I try desperately to humble myself. Anytime that God does anything that could be notable, I try desperately to force myself to believe, okay, you can't take any pride in this. You can't. Let God get all the glory. But the amount of struggle that I think I'd have if God used me to these heights, to not at least feel a little bit good about myself in there, to not take any pride. This is something that we could all learn from. Because Moses was willing to reject pride and arrogance, and he opened himself up through that rejection to be able to improve and grow closer to God. He opened himself up to wisdom. Proverbs chapter 15, verses 31 through 33. The ear that listens to life-giving reproof will dwell among the wise. Whoever ignores instruction despises himself, but he who listens to reproof gains intelligence. The fear of the Lord is instruction in wisdom, and humility comes before honor. This is not an easy thing to do. Because it's very difficult to both be good at something and not take any pride in it. I know this because we as people tend to get prideful over stupid things. We really do, and I'm up here, so I'll self-deprecate a little bit further. Let's make you think lower of me. So you know that Tommy is partnered with Bill, and they have Vendetta, the cafe, and I like to help out every once in a while. It gives me some pocket change for date night with my wife, and then I'm able to like sneak free coffee drinks that are amazing quality. So I love that. It's a good deal. I feel like we both benefit there. But after I had worked there for a little bit, I found myself getting oddly prideful because I started to make a really good cappuccino. Like I'm talking, if you don't know about cappuccinos, that's okay. But it's a very frothy, very silky texture that you want to go for in the milk. And a lot of people mess it up. They do. I don't think I have had a single cappuccino outside of what I've had at Vendetta that I would say that's a good cappuccino. But I haven't been to Italy yet, and apparently it's all good over there. But I started to make some of the best cappuccinos. I'm talking silky. And then somebody comes in, this little kid, and he was just terrible at first, like very, very slow, very bad. And I was like, I don't know about this person. And they start to study a lot, and they start to like apply themselves. And before I know it, goes by, and they are an excellent barista, like phenomenal. And they start to try to give me pointers on how to make a good cappuccino. And I'm like, me? You're trying to give me pointers on how to make a good cappuccino? Okay, bud. And then I see all the baristas coming in behind me who are actually humbling themselves and being like, oh, why don't you teach me about coffee? They're over here doing latte art. They're making great cappuccinos. And sooner or later, like, I'm not the only one making great cappuccinos. And I'm like, well, I'm not so special anymore. Well, boy, do I feel foolish, because you guys are over here actually humbling yourselves, listening. And me, I was so prideful, I shut that down. Like, you teach me anything? That's about cappuccinos, guys. I mean, we all have our cappuccino equivalent. We all have that thing that we're like, oh yeah, I'm good at that. Oh, somebody's gonna tell me about that. They don't have anything to teach me. And this is unfortunately the same reason why a lot of churches get so corrupt. Because they have one lead pastor who God has used at some point, but instead of humbling themselves, they instead find themselves talking about their knowledge, how in all of their years of doing this, they know how to do it the exact right way. How God has used them in the past, so they know everything that you need to do in ministry. And if somebody tries to talk into their life, if they say, maybe we're doing this a little bit wrong, maybe we should do it this way, their pride takes a hold, and they shut it down because they think they're the only one who knows how to do ministry. This is why I really appreciate Mercy Hill, because I just it might have been our latest staff meeting, I got to see Pastor Tommy, who I think like has done a great job in ministry, but he's saying, I went to an elders meeting and I had this opinion. I told them that we should do this, and the elders decided we should do something else. And I said, okay. I'm like, that's really what we all should be doing more of. The issue is that once you let pride take hold, you cut yourself off from improving and walking in step with God. This is why Moses' reaction is so amazing, because he had so much more reason than any of us to struggle with pride. When I read the story of Moses, I personally used to focus on the miracles, and I'd say things like, wow, God, I wish that you used me in the same way that you used Moses. I want to know what it'd feel like just once to have you use me to split the Red Sea. Now when I read it, the thing that I desire most is Moses' heart. One that loves God and knows that anything that God does through him is God's accomplishment and not his own. And his only desire is to be obedient to what God calls him to. Because once you have that, you open yourself up to continually growing with God, walking in step with him, not just stagnating. You open yourself up to wisdom. Proverbs chapter 15, verses 31 through 33. Going to reread this verse. The ear that listens to life-giving reproof will dwell among the wise. Whoever ignores instruction despises himself, but he who listens to reproof gains intelligence. The fear of the Lord is instruction in wisdom, and humility comes before honor. So now that we've went over what it takes to receive wisdom from God, now let's talk about what the wisdom that God gave to Moses was. Exodus chapter 18, verses 13 through 23. The next day, Moses sat to judge the people, and the people stood around Moses from morning till evening. When Moses' father-in-law saw all that he was doing for the people, he said, "What is it that you are doing for the people? Why do you sit alone, and all the people stand around you from morning till evening?" And Moses said to his father-in-law, "Because the people come to me to inquire of God. When they have a dispute, they come to me, and I decide between one person and another, and I make known the statutes of God and his laws." Moses' father-in-law said to him, "What you are doing is not good. You and the people with you will certainly wear yourselves out, for the thing is too heavy for you. You are not able to do it alone. Now obey my voice, I will give you advice, and God be with you. You shall represent the people before God and bring their case to God, and you shall warn them about the statutes and the laws and make known the way in which they must walk and what they must do. Moreover, look for able men from all the people, men who fear God and who are trustworthy and hate a bribe. And place such men over the people as chiefs of thousands, of hundreds, of fifties, and of tens, and let them judge the people at all times. Every great matter they shall bring to you, but every small matter they shall decide themselves. So it will be easier for you, and they will bear the burden with you. If you do this, God will direct you. You will be able to endure, and all this people also will go to their place in peace." You see, there are a few different gems in here, and a lot of them have very direct application to us as a church. And the main idea that connects them all is this: no one person can be the church by themselves. Now, for context here, for those of you who don't know, at this point, Moses is overseeing over 600,000 people. And we know the numbers because we're told this earlier in Exodus. This is Exodus chapter 12, verse 37. "And the people of Israel journeyed, and about," skipping forward, "600,000 men on foot, besides women and children." So this isn't even including them. So Moses was judging every problem that over 600,000 people had. Now let's put that in perspective. Mercy Hill is not quite 1,000 people. Let's round up, though. I like 1,000. It's easier for math. I love Pastor Tommy, but he is not handling every individual problem for all of us. And that's not because he doesn't want to. He might tell us that. I'm just joking. He's a great guy. But not because he doesn't want to, but because it literally is impossible for him to do. We're talking about, for 1,000 people, all individual life issues, all career changes, all marriage conflict, theological questions, general advice for every single one of us. If he went without eating or sleeping for an entire week straight, he would have maybe 10 minutes for everybody. It's literally impossible. And this is why God blessed the church with other people who have stepped into different positions so that they can help the church out. And it's only because of these people who step in to support him that we're able to function together as a church. We can't put that whole burden on just one person. But that's just with our church. So now scale that up a bit to 600,000 people. And it makes much more sense why Moses' father-in-law had the reaction he did. He sounds much less unreasonable when you put in perspective the amount of people he is dealing with. He steps in, and Exodus chapter 18, verse 17 through 18, he says, "What you are doing is not good." And it wasn't. He just didn't have time. If he stayed there literally all day, we just went over the numbers. For 1,000 people, if you went without eating or sleeping for an entire week straight, you would maybe have 10 minutes. This man's trying to have enough time for 600,000 people. If he went without eating and drinking, he still wouldn't be able to get through every single issue they had. So Moses' father-in-law warns about something very specific. He warns Moses about wearing himself out, which is a big deal. And I want to focus on this issue a bit to shock at least some of you awake this morning. Look to your left and right, just make sure they aren't actually. That was supposed to be figurative, but I know when I start to drone on, sometimes you gotta wake up your neighbors, so I'm asking you to help me out there. So then, this is why I say it's such a big deal. Because we just got done going over all the miraculous things that God had done through Moses. So I think at this point, we had all at least agree that God has chosen to use Moses and that Moses was being blessed by God. Do we all agree? Is that fair of me to say? So then, how is it that somebody who's so clearly walking in step with God was being blessed by him, was then in danger of wearing himself out? If it wasn't a sin issue, if it wasn't God punishing him, what was the reason he was still in danger of failing? It was for one reason. That was for lack of support. And this is what I meant when I said I want to shock some of you awake this morning. Because it's so easy to come to church and just zone in on all that you think is wrong. To say, oh, I see this unfulfilled need in the church. To say, oh, I see these people who walked into church and walked out, nobody talked to them. What's up with that? They don't have somebody scanning, catching everybody? Saying, oh, this ministry isn't run the exact way I'd like it to be run. Or, oh, that sermon wasn't good enough, which today might be valid, but most weeks, I think that's more unreasonable. But you get the point. If all I wanted to do was be critical, I could find a multitude of things to point out. But the thing you have to ask yourself is, just because there's somewhere that's in need, does that mean that the people in leadership aren't trying to follow God? Does that mean that the leadership isn't praying and trying to seek God for his guidance and trying desperately to be obedient to what he calls them to? See, sometimes what we unintentionally do is we villainize people when we notice that they aren't perfect. When we notice that they have areas that need improvement. We assume the worst, and we jump right on to disparaging them. And we do the exact opposite of what would actually be helpful to them, supporting them. This isn't the first time that Moses would have failed without support. When we look at chapter 17, he was in a very similar situation. This is chapter 17, verses 8 through 13. Then Amalek came and fought with Israel at fill in the blank. I can't pronounce that word, and I'm not going to try. This is where I was saying, this is why they put me up here. This is to be encouraging to you all. Just because you can't pronounce all of those Old Testament words doesn't mean God can't use somebody like you. Rephidim, I think, is probably the closest guess I can give. So Moses said to Joshua, choose for us men and go out and fight with Amalek. Tomorrow I will stand on top of the hill with staff of God in my hand. So Joshua did as Moses told him and fought with Amalek. While Moses, Aaron, and Hur went to the top of the hill. Whenever Moses held up his hand, Israel prevailed, and whenever he lowered his hand, Amalek prevailed. But Moses' hands grew weary. So they took a stone and put it under him, and he sat on it, while Aaron and Hur held up his hands, one on one side and the other on the other side. So his hands were steady until the going down of the sun. And Joshua overwhelmed Amalek and his people with the sword. So quick recap, Israel is at war. And Moses, simple thing, all he has to do is hold up his hands in order to support them. And then they'd win. But the war is a long one. And Moses is struggling to keep his hands up. But there were two people up there with him that I really want to focus on. This is Aaron and Hur. See, they were both there to witness the entire thing. But let's imagine some of the things they could have done. Let's put ourselves in this place. Imagine it's you and your buddy, and you're sitting there and you're watching somebody, and it's like, okay, all they have to do is raise their hands and we win this war. Sometimes I wish God could be that clear with like, okay, you need to do this and you'll be successful. This is as clear cut as it gets. Okay, he's given us clear direction. Let's see him do it. And then you start to see his hands tremble. You're like, did you see that? He's kind of struggling over there. Kind of weak, if you ask me. He's been skipping shoulder day, I bet. It's very easy, Moses. If God was really prepping you for what he called you to, he would have had you taking the right protein supplements to build the right amount of muscle. And then you would have been able to hold your hands up the entire time, no problem. I'm starting to get suspicious, Moses, that God didn't actually call you to do this, and you're doing it of your own accord, because God prepares his soldiers for what he brings them into. Or they could have said, doesn't he understand how important this is? Look at him, already trying to put his hands down. Very simple, Moses. Doesn't he know that we all die? Doesn't he care about your life? Doesn't he care about mine? Why doesn't he just keep his hands up? What is he doing trying to take a break? They could have criticized him. They could have easily pointed out all the ways that he fell short. But instead, they do something beautiful. They simply see the areas where he's weak. They come along to help support him. And I really wish we could do this in church more, myself especially included. It's far too easy to be critical and not stop and ask, God, is there some way that I can go out and help them? Is there some way I can support them to where the burden isn't so heavy? And maybe the reason why they struggle so much is because there isn't someone there to help support them. And maybe, God, you have me here for a reason. And that reason isn't just to be critical. There's something I could be doing right now to help support my brothers and sisters in the church. Now, I know it's Super Bowl Sunday, so I'm not going to keep some of you very long. You're already checking out. You're imagining the wings, the ribs, the whatever you're making. And I get that. I respect that. But as we're wrapping up, I want you to keep these things in mind. God has created us as different parts of the same body. So let's not tear each other apart, because ultimately, we're still hurting ourselves. Let's ask God to bless each of us individually with his wisdom and pray against pride that would make us reject God's wisdom because we think too highly of ourselves or too lowly of others. God used a donkey to speak before, so he can use any one of us, even if it's somebody who you don't normally get along with or don't think would have anything good to say to you. We don't want to miss out because we were arrogant. And let's come to God and ask him if there's any area where we could be supporting our Christian brothers and sisters instead of judging them. Or if maybe we're the person who needs support. That we'd keep in mind even Moses would have failed if he didn't have God-fearing people around him who loved and supported him. We'll have people up front if any of these things resonated with you and you want prayer for this. They're here for you if you have any struggles in your current walk with God. Let today be the day that we all start to support one another and ask for that support when we need it. Dear Heavenly Father, as we're going into a time of worship, I just pray that you would clear our minds and that you'd free us of distraction, Lord, and that you would convict us if we're being too critical or thinking too lowly of our Christian brothers and sisters. Or that you would knock the pride out of our lives, Lord. If we think we're too good for help, for support, God, and that you just let us be the church. That you would just open our hearts up to seeking you and seeking you freely. In your holy and precious name I pray.